Hi friends, welcome to my mid-year reading journal flip through video. In this video, I'll walk you through all of my annual reading journal spreads filled out so far, show you what has worked for me and what hasn't, what I'll carry forward into my next reading journal, and what will end up in my journal ideas graveyard. I will also show you all of my individual book spreads so far. The journal I've been using is from Washi Tape. This is a square 8x8 size journal, and it's actually a sketchbook. If you want to support me, I do have a discount code with Archer and Olive you can use to get 10% off your order. I receive a small commission whenever someone uses my code PJ10. As you can see, this journal has gotten pretty chunky so far, and I only have a few more blank pages left, which means that it's time for a new journal. I'm debating between continuing using a square size journal or switching to a letter size. What do you guys think? What size should my next reading journal be? Leave your recommendations on the comment section down below. Now, let's just get into the actual journal content. When you first open the journal, you'll notice this little envelope. This is where I used to store my book covers. However, I ended up printing way too many covers of books that I want to read, so I decided to store them in this little tray instead, and it just makes it easier for me to find the book cover I want. So now the envelope has no use and it's just chilling here. So I probably won't need one in my next journal. Next spread is my reading journal cover page, and this is where I write down where I started my journal and when I'll finish it. The next annual spread is my shelfie. Whenever I finish reading a book, I add it to my shelfie and I color it, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Green books is for fiction, and I really need to make myself read some more nonfiction. As you can see, the pink is pretty little so far. My reading goal this year was to read at least one nonfiction a month, but that hasn't happened, so hopefully I get better at it. Next spread is my A to Z challenge, and I think I've done pretty well so far. I'm only missing 6 letters, and I already have H and V lined up for my next month's TBR, but if you have any suggestions for the other letters, let me know. The next spread I created so I could keep track of all the books that these subscription boxes had each month. This way I wouldn't get duplicates, and it also helps me plan ahead which boxes I want to pause or keep. When I first built this spread, I was subscribed to Owl Crate, Illumicrate, and Fairy Loot. However, since then, I've also subscribed to Goldsboro Sci-Fi Box, and that's why I have this little notepad here with all of the books to keep track of those books that subscription box offers. My next spread is my TBR, and originally this was a compromise of book recommendations that you guys recommended to me. However, this year I went a bit crazy with all the book buying, so I created a physical TBR section where I could keep track of all of the books that I bought but haven't read yet. I'm trying to catch up with all these reads first before I ask people for any additional recommendation. So many books, so little time. Do you guys feel my pain? I'm sure you do. My next spread is my book bracket spread, and the way that the book bracket works is that each month you pick a favorite of the month. Then these books fight against each other until you're left with your top 2 books, in my case, of the year, and then you pick your favorite book of the year down here below. This is a great spread in theory, but in practicality it's so tough because I read some amazing books, and it's just hard to pick just one favorite. And for the first 6 months of this year, these have been my favorite books. In January, I picked A Court of Thorns and Roses. In February, I picked Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. In March, I picked Daughter of the Moon Goddess. In April, I picked All My Rage. In May, I picked Kingdom of the Curse. And in June, I picked Six Crimson Cranes. Out of all these amazing books, the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo sneaked her way into the semifinals. Meet me here in 6 months, I guess, to see who she's going to face and who our winner for the year will be. The next 2 spreads are 2 additional reading challenges. The first one is my book bingo, and I think I did pretty good so far. I'm only missing 2 books. Unfortunately, I don't think I have anything that fits my criteria in my physical TBR so far, so I'm not sure what's going to happen until the end of the year. The next reading challenge is my Goodreads reading challenge. My goal for this year was 4 to 5 books, with a bonus of 55. As of June, I actually read 36 books. At the time of the video in mid-July, I'm at 39, so that's why you see this circled. These cute stickers that I use for these spreads are from Pineberry Paper, and I just became a summer rep for them. If you mention my code XHOJ10, you'll get 10% of your order, as well as a freebie sticker sample that includes some of these book stickers. The next spread I created was 22 books in 2022. This spread was supposed to act as a list of my most anticipated releases this year. And I'm kind of slacking with this spread, to be honest. I've read only 4 books from the list. Daughter of the Moon Goddess, Electra, All My Rage, and Book of Night. 3 of them have been pretty big hits. They were all 5-star reads, whereas Electra was the only one that was a bit of a disappointment for me. I do have physical copies of Gallant, This Woven Kingdom, Only a Monster, and To Paradise, so I think I will get to those books in the next few months. But for the other ones, I'm not sure if I'll have a chance to do them this year. My next spread is my index page, and I find this page extremely helpful in my reading journal because it makes it easier to find any book spreads I want, and it also acts as an index of all the books I read so far. Next spread is the Lifetime in Reading spread, and this was a reading challenge, and the way that it works is that each month you read a book from the prompt list here. I did Wealth from January through April. However, I kind of gave up. What I learned from myself from this challenge is that I don't like challenges that tell me what to read. I'm more of a mood reader, so I'll read whatever I feel like whenever I feel like. So challenges like this one feel more like a burden, and I would hate for reading to turn into a burden for me, so I decided to just not do it at all anymore. It's a pretty spread, but I probably won't finish it. Unless it happens that a book that I read fits one of these prompts, I won't go out of my way to find books that do. This next spread is my Insta tracker, and when I first built this spread, I didn't have a YouTube, so that's why I didn't include like Insta and YouTube tracker. I only had the Instagram at the time, and it's amazing looking at the spread, how quickly I've grown in this past few months. I mean, I started at 300 followers on Instagram, and now I'm at like over 1,300, which is insane to me. So thank you so much for all of your support, and I really appreciate you all. Next spread is First Line of the Book spread. This is another one of those spreads that sounded great in my head, but once I started implementing it, I failed. The way it was supposed to work is that I would write down the first sentence for all of the books that I would read. However, this didn't work as well as I was hoping. For starters, I didn't leave enough room for each sentence. Some of the books have like an entire paragraph as their first sentence, so that obviously didn't fit. The other reason is that after a while, I lost track of which book the sentence came from. I still think it's a good thing to track, but I'm out of ideas as to how the best way to track it would be. Let me know in the comments below if you track this kind of information, and if so, how do you do it? So this is where my annual spreads that I had originally created end. However, since then, I created a few other spreads that I want to keep track of on an annual basis. And since I don't like to split my book spreads, I created the spreads at the very end of my journal. The first spread that I created was a series tracker. This year I started reading a lot more series than normal, so I wanted a way to keep track of which book I was on. At first I only had a few, but that list has grown a bit bigger since I made the spread, and I just haven't kept track of it that well. For my next reading journal, I want to create a simpler version of the spread, and I also want to add a series name until I actually finish the first book. The next section in here was dedicated to my subscription boxes spoilers cards. They have such adorable art on them, and I wanted a way to keep track of them. The Owl Crate ones fit perfectly in here, however the Fairy Loot ones are a bit too big, and so I had to cut them down. And I stopped doing that though, since I didn't want to cut them down anymore, and instead I saved them in this photo album kind of style. And I really like this a lot much better. The next spread that I created is a way to keep track of book purchases. This spread is probably one of my most used ones. Like I mentioned earlier, I went a bit crazy with book buying and pre-orders this year, and this spread made it easy to keep track of which books I bought each month. Once I received the book, I'd put a check mark next to it, just to make sure that, yes, I received it. There's books that I've pre-ordered since February and I'm still waiting on, and if I didn't have this spread to remind me, I probably would have forgotten all about it. Next spread is my subscription box book rating. My main 3 active subscriptions as of now are Illumicrate, FairyLoot, Young Adult and Adult, and Goldsboro GSFF. Each month, I write down the name of the book that I received, as well as the rating I gave that book. Going into next year, I want to be a bit more mindful of my finances, so this spread will help me with figuring out which subscription to cut and which one to keep. I'll be keeping the one with the highest average rating. The next spread is basically like a rough idea as to what I want to do for my next journal. I saw this Tetris book challenge on Instagram and I wanted to implement it with my current reads so far. I wish I had picked some better colors, but these were the ones that I had handy at the time. And I really like the idea of the challenge, so I will definitely try to implement it better in my next journal. And that marks the end of all of my annual spreads. So now let's jump into the actual book spreads. I like separating my books for each month by having a monthly cover page and a monthly stats page all in one, as you can see here. For the first 6 months of the year, I used these Dutch doors that came with an Archer and Olive December subscription box. And I really loved how it looked. I wanted to keep the stats pages in a black and white theme. On the right side, I'd circle all of the dates in which I read, and then write down all the book titles for that month. I also added a little box to keep track of the total number of books read, as well as the total number of pages. On the left side is where I would keep track of all of the stats. The stats that I normally track are star rating, publishing year, genre, fiction versus nonfiction, age demographic, so adult versus YA versus middle grade children, and then author identity, so male versus female, author nationality, author race, and whether the book had any LGBTQ representation. For January and February, I won't spend too much time talking about the spread since I already made a video of them, which I'll link down below. I'll stop talking now and let you enjoy the music, and I'll just flip through the pages. Didn't end up making a video about the following March spreads, so I'll talk briefly about them. I read 5 books on March. 3 of them were 5-star reads and 2 4-star reads, so overall a pretty fun month. The first book that I read in March was Red, White, and Royal Blue. This was such a cute romantic read. For this spread, I used some of the Archer and Olive stickers. and the Simply Gilded Washi Tape. And this image of Alex and Henry is from a calendar that I got from one of the Illumicrate boxes. I just cut it down and then pasted it in here. The next read was Technically Wrong, and this was my nonfiction for the month. It's always hard making spreads for nonfiction books, especially the ones that are business related or self-improvement. So for this one, I ended up drawing a sand clock and how we're drowning slowly by all the social media that we're constantly using. Next spread was The Night Circus. This was another great read, and I really liked the book, and it dawned on me that one of the greatest strategies of my life is that I'll never be able to visit the Cirque du Rêve outside of my imagination. So here we are. I created this Dutch door spread so that when you open it, the tent, you see an image of Celia and Marco. This image was also in the same Illumicrate calendar as the red, white, and royal blue, so I just cut it and pasted it in here, and then I used some scrapbooking paper for the star pages. Next read in March was The Maidens. I used a mix of Sticky Club stickers and Pineberry paper stickers for this one. I really liked the mystery in this book, and I love those books that make me think I have solved mystery only to be blindsided in the end. Final book for March was Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I never thought I would have it in me to draw peonies, but here we are. I love how I drew them, but I'm not too crazy about my watercolor skills. I kind of wish I had used another medium, but I'm not the greatest colorist, so I just ended up leaving them as is. I really like this book and the story, though. It's so beautifully rewritten, so I highly recommend that. April was probably my weakest month in terms of reading. I picked up my puppy in April, so my life was suddenly very chaotic, and I didn't really have much time to read or do any journaling, so a lot of these spreads that you'll see, I actually ended up doing in June. The first book I read was The Charm Offensive. I almost feel like this book was a fan fiction of the Bachelor season where the Bachelor ended up being gay. I listened to the audiobook, so I wasn't a huge fan of the narrator, and that maybe played a role in me not enjoying the book as much as I was hoping. Next book was All My Rage, and oh my god, this book is amazing. I highly recommend reading it. This is one of those spreads that has nothing to do with the book content, since I didn't have much of an inspiration as to how to make the spread. However, I still wanted to capture the essence of the book and write about it, so I decided to just go for it and make a spread anyways. I used mostly Notebook Therapy washi tape and Cafe Analog pet tape for the girls. The next book I read was Firekeeper's Daughter. This was another simple spread. The book cover for this book is just so gorgeous, so I wanted to draw it, but I could never get the faces to match, so I just gave up and printed them instead. And I love how it looks. The book took me a while to finish, as I just did not like the main character much. However, I did really enjoy learning about her culture and customs. In May, I ended up reading 5 books. I have a video on my profile which shows in detail how I made all of these spreads. I'll make sure to link it on the description below, so check it out if you want. For now, I'll just flip through them and let you enjoy it. In June, I ended up reading 4 books. First one is Book of Night. I feel like the book community is very torn on this book, but I personally really liked it. That ending left me wanting the next book like now. Also, Holly Black reposted the spread on her Instagram, and I was just through the moon. I was so happy and so glad that she liked it. Next book was The Atlas 6. I really like the concept of this book way more than the execution of it. I hope that the second book is better. I feel like a lot and nothing happened at the same time. I also have a Journal With Me video that shows you in detail how I made the spread, so make sure you check that out. The next read was 6 Crimson Cranes. This was such an adorable read. I can't believe that it took me so long to read it. I really loved the story and I loved Kiki. I want a Kiki best friend. For this spread, I had some origami paper that fit perfectly with the theme of cranes and cherry blossoms, and so I just cut it up and then made this little Dutch door cutout. The last book for June was Counterfeit. I didn't really like the writing for this book, so I wasn't a huge fan. However, this spread was a great opportunity for me to finally use some of the luxury ribbons I've been hoarding. I also taped the Chanel Camellia here, which added a bit of bulk to the journal. The stickers here are from Sticky Club and the washi is from Notebook Therapy. Those were all the spreads so far. I haven't made my monthly July cover and stats page yet, but I can give you a sneak peek of some of the book spreads that I've made so far in July. The first book of July was Caraval. I love making this circus stands as Dutch doors so that when you open up, you can write everything you want pretty much for the book. I used mainly watercolor to make the spread. Caraval was a fun read and I'm trying to read the second book right now. The second book that I read was Ordinary Monsters. This book is like a cross between Umbrella Academy and Penny Dreadful. It's a bit of a slow read at first, but then it picks up and it gets very interesting. And can I just say that this is like my favorite spread so far? I don't know if it's since it's the only spread that's fully craft paper, but I'm obsessed with how it turned out. I have it open on my desk every day and I just stare at it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I used Stamperia scrapbook paper for this. The last book so far is the Complete Mouse graphic novel. This novel gave me all sorts of feels. I don't think I've ever read anything more touching, and it baffles my mind that there are states that have this book banned. Everyone needs to read this book and learn from their history so that it may never be repeated again. And those were all the spreads in my journal. I think I only have like 10 more blank pages before I'll need to switch to another journal. And one thing I'm debating is whether I should rebuild all of the annual spreads on that other journal or just continue with the book spreads. What do you guys do when you switch journals mid-year? Also, I'd love to know which spread was your favorite and who your favorite book this year has been so far. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.